Good afternoon, guys. This afternoon's discussion A is about the death of independent living as middle class costs soar, based primarily on the surrounding content, on the surrounding page content you're viewing. What the headline is really pointing to. The page frames this as part of a broader trend in 2026 in the 2026 housing market, where the traditional idea of independent living for older adults living alone in a private home or apartment is becoming financially out of reach for many middle class families. Instead, the page emphasizes a major shift: the return of the extended family home. This is presented as the defining change, reshaping housing in 2026. Rising costs are pushing families toward multi-generational living arrangements, not necessarily because they prefer it, but because the economics of living alone no longer work for a large portion of the middle class. Guys, the reason I did this show this morning is because this problem is affecting elderly care. All right, so why independent living is dying. Although the page doesn't provide a detailed article, the framing around the video makes the underlying message clear. Middle class costs are rising faster than incomes. Housing, utilities, food, and care related expenses have climbed to the point where maintaining a separate household, especially for older adults, is becoming unsustainable. Independent living requires multiple income streams or significant savings. For many middle class families, the math no longer works. The cost of a standalone home or apartment now competes with other essentials like healthcare, debt, and caregiving. Families are adapting by consolidating households. The page explicitly states that the 2026 market is being reshaped by the return of extended family home. This suggests a structural shift, not a temporary blip. What extended family home signals? The trend isn't just about housing, it's about caregiving aging, and economic survival. The surrounding content hints at themes you and I have explored before: families pooling resources, adult children moving back in with parents, or vice versa, care needs increasing as costs rise. A cultural shift towards shared responsibility. It aligns with the broader pattern you've been tracking. The middle class is being squeezed into new forms of independence, of interdependence. Why this matters for your work. The headline is more than a housing story. It's a care story, a family system, a family system story, and a dignity story. It reinforces the themes you've been weaving into your podcasts and handouts. The erosion of independence as a realistic expectation. The need for practical frameworks for shared living. The emotional and logistical work of integrating generations. The opportunity to reframe multi-generational living as humane, not economical. It's a moment where economic pressure is forcing a cultural reckoning. A set of talking points for your next episode. The core message: elder care costs are rising so fast that millions of families, especially middle class families, are being pushed into the edge of financial ruin, often depleting nearly all their wealth to keeping aging loved ones safe. This isn't a metaphor, it's a measurable, accelerating collapse of financial stability for families who once believed they were prepared. What this headline is really pointing to: the reporting from KFF Health News and the New York Times exposes a truth that policymakers have avoided for decades. The United States does not have enough functional long-term care system. What exists instead is a fragmented, unpredictable, and deeply inequitable patchwork that leaves families to navigate care on their own, usually at enormous personal costs. The numbers tell one story, but the lived experience tells another. adult children quitting jobs to provide care because hiring help is unaffordable, spouses draining 401ks and home equity to cover memory care units, families forced into heartbreaking decisions like leaving a loved one at a hospital to trigger Medicaid intervention. Meanwhile, the cost of every form of care in home aids, assisted living, memory care, nursing homes is rising at a pace that dwarfs inflation. A single year in a nursing home can exceed 120,000, and memory care units often cost even more. Layered on top of this is a demographic tidal wave. 10,000 boomers turn 65 every day, a trend that continues until 2030. By 2050, the number of Americans aged 85, those most likely to need intensive care, will nearly triple. The headline captures a collision between aging and economics, and a policy failure, a collision now hitting the middle class hardest. Why families are facing financial ruin. Long-term care costs are exploding. Federal protections show long-term care spending soaring toward 500 billion annually, driven by labor shortages, rising wages for aides, and the increasing medical complexity of aging adults. Families are absorbing these costs directly because there is no universal long-term care benefit. Insurance is not a safe net. Long-term care insurance, once marketed as the solution, has largely collapsed. Insurers underestimate how long people will live and how expensive care would become. Premiums skyrocketed. Companies exited the market, and today only a small sliver of Americans have policies, even those do often discover restrictive gaps or caps and exclusions. Medicaid is the only fallback, but only after families lose almost everything. To qualify for Medicaid long-term care, families must spend down assets to poverty levels. This means draining savings, selling homes, liquidating retirement accounts. Middle class families who have some assets but not enough to cover years of care are uniquely vulnerable. They are too wealthy for help, too poor to afford care. Caregiving uh, destabilizes entire households. The emotional and financial toll is intertwined. Caregivers often reduce work hours or leave jobs entirely. Accumulate credit card debt, experience burnout, depression, and health decline. Some families resort to extreme measures, like leaving loved ones in an ER because it is the only way to access state funded care. What this means and what this means for middle class, this is not a niche issue. It's a mainstream middle class emergency reshaping American life. The boomer generation, once the backbone of the middle class, is at risk of dying broke even after a lifetime of savings. Regions like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and the broader Midwest, where wages have stagnated and populations are aging, are feeling the crisis most acutely. Multi-generational living is rising not as a cultural revival, but as a survival strategy. Families are pooling resources because the cost of maintaining separate households plus elder care is simply impossible. This this is this is quite unraveling of the financial assumptions that defined post-war American life. That hard work, savings, and home ownership would secure stability in old age. Why this matters for your work, for caregivers, educators, and community leaders, like the audience you serve. This headline is more than a warning. It's a call to reframe how families think about aging planning and care. The U.S. elder care system is not just strained, it's structurally it is structurally incapable of supporting the aging population without families sacrificing their financial future. Your work helping families understand the landscape, prepare emotionally, and navigate options is becoming essential because education, public education, if you'd like, I can turn this into a podcast segment online, a caregiver focused explainer, a community handout for Erie Meadville families, or myth busting what families need to know Now, brief. Okay, guys, that is A for you. I will be back on later tonight or tomorrow for shows. For now, Gator Wellness. Take care, folks.